meet many just like me upon life's busy street, with shoulders stooped and heads bowed low and eyes that stare in defeat, for souls that live within the past, where sorrow plays all parts, where a living death is all that's left for men with broken hearts.
You have no right to be the judge, to criticize and condemn. Just think, but for the grace of God, it would be you instead of him. One careless step, a thoughtless deed, and then the misery starts. And to those who weep, death comes cheap. These men with broken hearts.
Humble you should be when they come passing by, for it's written that the greatest men never get too big to cry. Some lose faith in love and life when sorrow shoots her darts, and with hope all gone, they walk alone, these men with broken hearts.
You never stood in that man's shoes or saw things through his eyes, or stood and watched with helpless hands while the heart inside you dies.
While the heart inside you dies. Some were paupers, some were kings, and some were masters of the arts. But in their shame, they're all the same, these men with broken hearts.
Life sometimes can be so cruel that a heart will pray for death.
God, why must these living dead know pain with every breath?
So help your brother along the way, no matter where he starts. For the same God that made you made him too. These men with broken hearts.
These men with broken hearts.
Ain't that the awfulest, morbidest song you ever heard in your life? Don't know how I happened to write that thing, except that somebody that fell, he's the same man as before he fell, ain't he? Hank Williams Sr. Can you believe everything you read about another unless you know what was within his heart? You know, you can look at something and relate it to an individual without their name ever being visible. This poem to me exudes the very essence of who and what Elvis Presley was. Of course, we know he spent a lifetime looking for the reasons why him. He always paid reverence to God for his talent. It was given to him and he shared it with us. For me, this is not in question. But to really understand the spirit and soul of this man as I see it, I think the words of this poem really do give a glimpse as to what dwelled deep inside of him. Elvis never expressed in words as to why he used a part verse of Hank Williams' poem in the prelude to singing Walk a Mile in My Shoes, a cover of Joe South's 1970 hit. I cannot profess to know why he used the words of this poem. Only Elvis himself will be able to tell you this. Or perhaps if there was a person he had confided in about why it so resonated within him. More importantly, I guess another question could be, was there someone he could have confided in? Remember how his all-consuming spiritual quest was treated by those closest around him? The burning of his books, the laughter behind his back, the mistrust and jealousy afforded to Larry Geller. This will tell you that perhaps over time, Elvis resigned himself to the fact that he would only tell those good old boys what they wanted to hear, what they were capable of hearing, Or perhaps he just didn't trust them at all with the truth. And could anyone blame him? You only have to look at many of the books written after his death to know that most of the guys were on a far different evolutionary pathway to his. I understand the need to have his very own thoughts on this, or even a quote he made regarding this poem, of course. If we had this, the question would not have arisen. And I may not be right in this post, of course. These are only my thoughts and interpretations. But if you look hard enough into the meaning of the poem and relate them to the words he did give us, the behaviour he displayed all throughout his life, doesn't a picture emerge? Even when succumbing to his own demons, he always tried his best, always tried to help his brother. But that picture doesn't properly come into focus until the biggest influence on his adolescent years reveals herself within this poem also. Can you not hear her words? Can you not hear her very lessons in life and how to treat others? Gladys's mother is in there, no question within my mind. If you go back further through his family history, way back further than his childhood, even into the history of America and the genocide of the Red Man, you will see how the men in the lyrics of this poem were his people. I see the persecution of many men and many races, his Indian heritage, his blood, his part Cherokee blood, and how much of their blood was shed. I see the black people, the downtrodden folk of his formative years he was brought up with and played with in the dirt. For that matter, it could be any colour or creed you can think of, because he was drawn to the downtrodden. Wasn't that who he was? A champion of the downtrodden. He grew up amongst these people to quote his people. It doesn't take a great leap of faith if you really try hard enough to hear Gladys' very breath, her cautionary tales of hardened men and even harder hearts that keep all they have to themselves. Her very own words run through this poem, what she instilled into him, for him to believe that when someone is broken, you give them a hand. You help them along their way. It may be as simple as the giving of a new pair of shoes and putting them on a road to somewhere. You get them a new pair of shoes, you bend down and you put them on their feet and you send them on the road to somewhere. I believe he always remembered that lesson. Can anyone read this poem and not see Elvis's own mindset within the words? She in turn showed him exactly this very thing. As any good loving mother would, wouldn't she have patched his breeches, ironed and washed his shirts and given him pride, a pride to go out and be different, to be who he really was, to do what he really could do. Although he may have had doubts, she wiped them away. Her influence was the roots that grounded him, and he grew from those roots into the man he became because of her. How many times in his life he may have had his head in his hands? How many times did her words bring him back? She was his barometer of good. She was the person he knew. In turn, how many others said the same of Elvis? So he tried all through their life together to give back, repay everything he'd ever been given. And he'd been given so much. It's about not keeping everything to yourself so that another has nothing. If you share, you get what you really want, that feeling inside of you. There's nothing in this world that can repay that feeling inside of you. I guess you can never have that feeling until you have shared. Whether it be to a pair of shoes, a crust of bread, or even a Cadillac. Now you can appoint this to his generosity, to that big old emotional heart of his. But the real essence of this is Gladys. That feeling that he got from giving, passed on to him with such a love and a nurturing from a devoted mother. Would he have known any different of how others were to be treated? Of course he saw this as he grew, and I can imagine, and justifiably so, the hurt and anguish it would have caused. What Elvis displayed is what many of his generation lacked. Of course not all, but many within that time, no question, are those from the South, had further to travel. And sadly it's happening even now, not just in the States, but worldwide. an intolerance of others, a lack of empathy and an understanding. They shared with him, didn't they? Those black folks he grew up with. He's on record as saying as much, that if it wasn't for the black people and the grace of God, that little family would have starved. They showed real compassion and that spirit within to give where there's nothing to give. That's giving. Shake Rag, the Hill, would have reaffirmed a togetherness, a solidarity, a brothership and friendship, regardless of your social standing. So much of white America grew blind to this, as many were turning their backs and looking the other way. And the words can be found within the poem. Being humble, not criticising, judging or condemning. Helping your brother along the way, no matter where he starts. People were people. And he was shown that from a very early age. Who wept tears of grief when MLK died? What a waste. What a waste of a brilliant, generous, wonderful man. All because he just had the wrong coloured skin for America and the world. What have we learned? Why are we still in that time? Listen to his plea. Listen to the passion and the raw emotion he invested in If I Can Dream. And tell me this guy wasn't an activist. He delivered that message. How many were listening? And all the while others were trying to steer him away from making such statements. And in 1970, up upon stage at the International, he's still making his point. Oh well, I may be common people, he cries, but I'm your brother. And when you strike out to hurt me, it's a hurting you. Lord have mercy. Elvis walk a mile in my shoes. And it makes more sense to me now how this hugely important cultural and historical figure has been so readily and hugely misunderstood. There are so many instances of not seeing what was intended or what was within his heart, when all along he planted his footsteps firmly and honestly in life's journey. Why was that path he trod not used as a guide and a map for others to follow? Forget his own problems that he had, because throughout it all of it, and this I truly believe, he tried to do his very best. You can reel off many instances of him just trying to do some good. Just as an example among the many, going back to the summer of 1956, the Memphis World, an African-American newspaper, reported that Presley, the rock and roll phenomenon, cracked Memphis segregation laws by attending a local amusement park on what was designated as its coloured night. In December of that year, he of course attended and gave his full support to the WDIA Goodwill Festival and repeated his wholesome support the following year. Of course, all throughout this, he became a figure of loathing for the many white adult folk of America, the KKK being one of his biggest denouncers. And then when we see the dark hand of dark souls play its trump card, Sepia's anti-Negro slur that tried to derail his decency, his continual support of people, regardless of who they were. People were people. Even though it was proved to be a vicious lie, it still tries to overshadow what was within this boy's heart and what his mother taught him. Why is it still being talked about in this year 2021, when it was ripped to shreds by that great Louis Robinson for Jet magazine? What if this lie had never been printed? How would the legacy of Presley as a unifying figure be viewed? It's a tragedy that this has happened. For him to be denied this, to me, is one of the saddest parts of all in the story of Elvis Presley. Another incident I've given a lot of thought to, and this really requires some thought, and I certainly have challenged my way of thinking, is his visit to the White House in December of 1970. And it amounts to so many what ifs. What if the story that has been told is not actually what transpired? What if the intention of his visit wasn't just to obtain a badge? What if another president was in power? What if the story had been told wasn't clouded and coloured by those that tried to interpret it as how they saw it? Maybe, just maybe, we are looking at this episode completely wrong. What if a figure like Kennedy was still in power? What if Nixon in subsequent years had not been brought to his knees by Watergate? What I'm trying to say is that wouldn't he have made this trip regardless of who was in power? Surely from what we know, his actions and intentions throughout his life were true and honourable. Doesn't this episode tell us something about who this man was? We know he instigated every inch of this visit to the White House. He was going it alone. We also know he arrived there in some type of stupor, railing furiously with his father over his out-of-control spending. Cars, guns, weddings. Rumours also circulated about his very increasing tiredness over the colonel. But putting these issues aside, wasn't he actually concerned about his country and the drug problems facing the youth? Wasn't respect being lost for the flag? Wasn't there much work to be done? We know he was without any question a huge patriot, proud of his country, loved his country. And yet still to this day, there seems to be an enormous amount of humour and hilarity that a man with drug issues of his own, prescription drug issues, sought to help others that were taking illegal street drugs. Is that too far-fetched to believe? Wasn't it in his nature to want to help regardless of what was going on within himself? Wasn't the most powerful entertainer in the world going to do something for his beloved country? Wasn't he going to go to the very top to seek out the world's most powerful man? Isn't that very much like Elvis? He had a persuasive tongue in his head, yes. He exuded charm and a legendary charisma. His purpose, I believe, was true. He really wanted to help. The real crime here was that he became increasingly unfit for the very purpose that he wanted it to be used for. Did he ever get taken up on his offer to help? And you listen to those that were not even there and they perceive why he went. They make big assumptions about his intentions and his state of mind. Marty Lacker called him stoned, even called into question his handwriting in regards to the sincere letter he wrote to Nixon. From his handwriting, he established he was stoned. From the photos taken, he questioned what else was going through his head. And I quote, "Some heavy-duty patriot shit, that's for sure." Lacker goes on further to describe his appearance when meeting Nixon, drawing parallels with Dracula. But above all, he looked stoned. He babbled on about stuff he thought Nixon wanted to hear. Respect to the flag was getting lost. What chance did he have? Seriously, these guys were in his inner circle, his trusted aides, and what did they really think of him? Can you believe all you read? Jerry Schilling, who was there, tells the story of how he saw it, tells it with a huge amount of understanding and respect for his friend. And when we get to the latest movie, Elvis and Nixon, and it gets turned into a comedy, I can't get my head around that. Why? What was lost in translation? What story has Jerry been telling all these years for the whole experience to be cheapened with laughter? Was this the only way to sell it to the American market? Something got lost along the way. Integrity, call it what you will. But somehow this whole experience got turned onto its head. And the most fascinating insight into where his supposed mind was at, as far away from being bedraggled with drugs, was the giving of $500 and a gift of a watch or a ring to a returning soldier from Vietnam. I guess he was showing his appreciation of the job he'd done for his country and so that his family could enjoy Christmas. Can you imagine what that serviceman said to his family on his return? What a wonderful part of the story missed out, and why I cannot fathom. This is the nuts and bolts of this man. This was his red, white and blue through and through. For what shall it profit a man if he gain the world and lose his own soul? Mark 8:36. Elvis never lost his soul, never lost sight of what he sought to be. Maybe he lost some of his abilities to be just what he wanted to be. But make no mistake, he never lost his heart within. Yes, the physical took its toll, Maybe his mental strength wavered, but that heart within always stayed true, because no one stood in his shoes or saw things through his eyes. And that, more often or not, that gets lost in the life and times of Elvis Aaron Presley. Thank you very much. I got a bit animated there. I was beating a drum, wasn't I? Because it's a very important story. Look, the last passage of that where Elvis visits Nixon. Yes, we know he wanted his badge. We know that. But he really wanted to use it for the right purpose. And I think sometimes that's lost, or that's our interpretation of it. Yes, he was a collector. We know that. But I believe his sincerity, you know, as was stated in that passage of superb writing, once again, by Craig, it gets lost. But we wanted to put that heartfelt plea of how Elvis Presley really should be viewed today. And very much, as I've already mentioned, it does get lost to the detriment of his legacy, which is a real shame, because we know the truth about Elvis on here. We just need to share it, folks. Share it around the world. And if I can do my small part, that is what I will continue to do. Hello, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that. It's something I've been planning for a few weeks. And trust me, that was a lot to read through. Yes, I was reading it today because there's no way I could remember all of that. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts on it. As you can tell, and we've tried to tell a story through his Through His Eyes series, that Gladys is very much at the core of who Elvis Presley was. Also Vernon, of course, but Gladys was that influence that I don't think ever should be lost or forgotten in who Elvis Aaron Presley was. I think I'm going to leave it there today, because I think enough has been said. Like I say, if you like this, please subscribe, please thumbs up, and obviously hit that notification bell, because there are new videos cropping up all the time. Next week, if I don't get girls, we will be doing Fun in Acapulco. I did a little trailer last week that seems to have gone down very well. That's already in production as we speak. But thank you very much for watching. I wish you all have a great week, and please take care of yourselves. Thank you.